Okay, we are going to backtrack for like 30 seconds here. Hi, everybody. We are here for Lead 605. This is Module Two's class Zoom session. And once again, I have been busy talking with everybody and did not hit record until I was reminded by a responsible class member. So, in a quick review, this week is all about utilitarianism, act, and rule. Act utilitarianism is all about this act at this time, what kind of consequences do we have? Is it going to mean the greatest happiness or the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Rule utilitarianism is still about the consequences. We want that greatest amount of good for the greatest number, but it says that that rule has to provide that consistently for the greatest number of people. So the rule has to be consistent. It isn't just a specific context, it's in general. Will this rule provide the greatest amount of happiness? So in Star Trek, we're looking at the prime directive and how that fits in. Is it rule utilitarianism? Is it act utilitarianism? I have seen that argued well either way, so you get to pick. And then Spock's Vulcan philosophy of the greatest good for the greatest number. Um, that's also in the film. So you get to think about that in terms of consequentialism, which is the broader term for utilitarian type theories. It's all about the consequences. So you'll be analyzing those. And then you move on to your paper, in which now you are going to be a researcher. There's a lot of material in this module, and you won't get through all of it, and that's fine. Some of it's listed in the required section. A lot of it's listed in the recommended because it's there in case you have a chance to look at it, but it goes through the creation of the atomic bomb. That's something that it's been 80 years now. People still fight about whether or not that was the right thing to do because many, many, many people died horrible deaths. On the other hand, it brought an end to the war and saved a lot of lives in that way. So it's very controversial, but it's an example of researchers developing a new idea, a new creation, a new product. And then after they developed it, then many of them wanted to control it. They argued for treaties to control or to limit the number of nuclear weapons. They didn't really want their creation out there. They created it in the hopes that it would never be used, and then it was used. So controlling something after it leaves the lab is next to impossible. So, as a researcher, if you're going to set up a lab and you have some exciting research project going on, what are your limits? What kind of rules do you put in place? What consequences are acceptable? What are not? But how do you set that up in the form of rules or guidelines for your researchers? What kind of consequentialist theories can you use? Can you use rule utilitarianism? Can you use act utilitarianism and turn those into actual rules to guide a research project? So that's what you're thinking of. And you get to make up any sort of research project you want, put yourself in any position you want. You are fully funded, unlike today's researchers. So you can do whatever you want to do, but the idea is to think through those safeguards. How do you guide the research? So you are not the ones trying to corral it after you've let it loose into the world. So that's what the paper's about. And we will be doing quite a bit of that sort of thing this term, putting yourself in a role, creating a role for yourself in different ways and going, okay, now what would I do? How would I control this? How would I guide this? How would I inspire this in an ethical fashion? How would I teach people my ethical standards or impart those to the project I'm working on or to the company I'm working with? So, ways of thinking about yourself and the ethical choices you may have to make down the road. So that's kind of what we're up to. I'm enjoying the vision boards so far. Those are fun. I love to see what's important to students. What did you pull out of the week that said, oh, that meant something to me? So those are going really well. For all of you, both Cecilia and Dee, but for everyone else out there, you want the fourth edition of the textbook, and I'm afraid a couple people do not have that one, which is that. It is the gold cover, but it'll say fourth edition on it, and it's 2025. If you have an online version, it might be dated 2024 because it did come out last summer. Um, but these two authors change up their textbooks frequently. They add in a lot of new case studies to keep it current, new ideas. They put things in, they take things out. So it changes dramatically from one edition to the next. So we're using the fourth edition. If you don't have that, you need to get your hands on it because we'll be talking about specific cases on and off through the course, and you'll want the right book or they aren't necessarily going to be there, which is a problem. Um, what kind of questions can I answer? How can I help you tonight?
You actually answered my question and how to differentiate act utilitarianism versus rule. You made it very clear that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that rule utilitarianism is based on rules and whether or not those rules can bring the greatest number of people happiness or
Mhm.
generate bright happiness. And then act is based on the action. Am I correct in the way I explain that?
Yeah, yeah, you're definitely on the right track. And when I say happiness, when you think of happiness or when you read that in a text, it isn't just, as in, oh, I feel great today, I'm happy. It's the
The
most
greater
good
good.
from the situation, whether that's, health, safety, financial benefit, whatever it is, respect, the goods that society values. That's what we're looking for. What's going to bring the greatest amount of happiness and the best welfare for everyone involved or for the most people involved and do the least harm at the same time, because sometimes there are still some negative benefits, but how do we get the most good out of what's happening? So a rule would have to work that way sort of for everybody or for as
Sure.
many people as possible. If it's act utilitarianism, it's a little more narrow. It's more like at this particular moment,
Okay.
this situation with these people, is this a good action? And then we get into the Jingles article on dirty hands. And, is a wrong act an act that we would normally say is morally wrong, but it has a good consequence? Is that morally permissible? Is that a good act? And where does responsibility for that kind of an action, where does that stop? When you think about your research paper, does it start or stop with the people selling the product that may have a defect? Does it go down to the people packing the boxes in the factory, the people on the assembly line, the designers, you as a supervisor, who's responsible for the harms down the road, even though they knew nothing about it and maybe their actions were thought to be good? The paper talks about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and Bonhoeffer was he Lutheran? He was clergy, and he was caught up in Germany during World War II and was part of a plot to kill various Nazi leaders because there was so much what he envisioned evil, or what he termed evil in his country, and so many horrible things were happening. And he was just part of the resistance. But he really agonized over that because his belief said, thou shalt not kill. And yet he was willing to be part of that plot. And he really, went back and forth. Can I do this? Can I not? Does the good of the act justify the evil in and of the act itself? And he ended up actually dying just before the end of the war in uh, a concentration camp. Um,
Oh,
yeah, so it's that sort of a philosophy when you think about the dirty hands. Was the atomic bomb the right thing to do, dropping the bomb? You know, was the fact that that stopped the war and saved hundreds of thousands of lives worth the hundreds of thousands of lives that it took? How do you sort that out? When is a bad act a good act? Yeah. So that's the idea of dirty hands. And that comes into a lot of really critical and difficult decisions. They aren't always clean cut, where there's only one right way to do it. There are often acts that feel somewhat repugnant that may have a good consequence. So under act utilitarianism, maybe they're okay. Under rule utilitarianism, maybe they aren't. Under some of the
mhm.
other theories we're going to study later, Again, maybe they're okay, maybe they're not. The theory that you use helps you make a determination. And so you can have two people sitting next to each other having a discussion and with violently opposing viewpoints who both really think that they're suggesting the right course of action, the moral course of action, and it's because they're looking at it in different ways.
Sure.
I was in the doctor's office with my husband earlier this week, and we're stuck in a waiting room forever. And there was a very elderly gentleman talking to someone next to me, and he was talking very loudly. And it was a highly charged political discussion. And I was amazed at how triggered I got by it because there's so much going on in the world right now. It's like, and everybody believes their side is right. They justify it. But he was not on the same side I was of many of the issues. And he just went on and got louder and louder. And I really wanted to get up and leave the room because I wasn't going to challenge this elderly gentleman who was just saying what he believed. But he truly believed it. You could tell from his conversation, and I could poke holes in that in a number of different ways, but that doesn't make me any more right than he was. We were coming at the world right now in politics from two very different perspectives. And each of us would believe that we were right and morally justified in our views. And that's painful in life. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in our country right now. We have good people on all sides, not all of them necessarily. Um, I don't believe that. And people do have to take responsibility for their actions. So all of this, the Klansmen are good things, does not work for me. Um, but we have good people on both sides of the political divide who really believe in what they say and what their leaders are doing and what they're saying, and they have moral justifications for it because they're looking at it in different ways. And when you look at a conflict like that, then you really have to start asking a lot of questions. Well, tell me why you believe that. Why do you think that? When you get into the whys, you start finding more common ground than you do differences. And it gets really interesting because the common ground is still there. But when we look at it from different frames or different perspectives, we come up with very different conclusions. And that's where a lot of conflict comes from. And so we can work our way through some of that. And as a peacemaker, that's kind of our job sometimes, is to do that. But understanding the different perspectives that people are using when they make moral choices really helps us to do that. So hopefully this course gives you some of that. It gives you a chance to dabble in a number of different perspectives so that you can pull those out and apply them and go, well, maybe I get that. Maybe I see where you're coming from now. You may or may not agree with it, but if you can understand it, that's a real step towards making peace and finding a way to talk to someone. So this week, you're going to play with utilitarianism, which is a useful theory, but consequences aren't everything. That's what other theories in the course are going to tell you is, oh, forget the consequences. Did you do the right thing? Because if it's the wrong thing, it doesn't matter how well it turned out, it was still wrong. That's next week's lesson. That's the deontological view. You have to do the right thing. And Immanuel Kant is one of the people we will read about next week, famous philosopher, but he was very big on your action doesn't mean a thing, even if you do the right thing, if you didn't do it because it's the right thing. So, um, very different way of looking at it. So that's where we're headed from here. So what other questions did you have tonight or interesting things you found? And I'm so glad that you're being introduced at long last to the world of Star Trek because how have you lived this long?
I was talking to my husband about it, and he's like, "Well, which Star Trek are we watching?" Because of course I'll pull him into it with me. And he's like, "There's like 20." And I'm like, "I'm not sure, but we'll find out when we get there." But yeah, never seen a Star Trek movie, so I'm excited. I'm a little nervous because I don't know anything about it. But I'm sure, you know,
Is it easy to follow?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
The Star Trek is like the Marvel universe or something. There's just a whole cast of characters. but they keep bringing them around in movie after movie. So, and this time they've just reimagined it. This is the movie you're watching, Into Darkness, is the second movie of the reboot. They started over. This is the second one. So that should help your husband figure it out. It's the second of the reboot with Chris Pine as Captain Kirk. Uh,
Okay.
Do you have to have seen the first one to understand the second one? Oh,
no,
okay.
That okay, good. That's a good question because I was concerned about that. I was like, wait, is this gonna pick off or start up from, another one and then we're gonna be confused on applying what we need to apply to it. But okay, that's a good
no,
question.
I think you'll be fine. In fact, you may have a clearer picture of the ethical issues than someone who's more familiar with it and has already bought into the characters, because you're going to look at what they're doing and go, why are they doing that? So you may have a
Okay.
clearer viewpoint on it, actually. Star Trek was developed in the 60s, which was a time of civil unrest. The Vietnam War, civil rights, flower power. This is the my youth, This is what was going on. There were demonstrations in the streets against the war. There were demonstrations for civil rights. There was violence. It was a time of a lot of unhappy people, so it kind of feels familiar. And Star Trek was this utopian, uh, scientific advances will cure everything sort of society that came out of that. A basic thing for the folks in Star Trek, the humans of the future, because it involves multiple worlds. But the humans of the future have conquered war and poverty and injustice. Everybody has an income. Everybody has access to what that they need, and therefore they have the freedom and the time to go out and pursue worthwhile careers or endeavors because they're not worried about getting paid. They're worrying about doing something
Hmm.
beneficial. And Star Trek is all about exploring the galaxies and going out and finding new worlds and meeting new people and learning new things. And so the ship that you see in the film has gone to a new world, and that world has a more primitive people, but they have a volcano that's about to explode, and that volcano will quite possibly destroy the entire population. Well, the prime directive says thou shalt not interfere with other cultures. But the crew of the Enterprise says, but we could fix this and they'd never know we were there. We could mess with the volcano and do something scientific and tricky and save everybody and disappear, and they'd never know we were here. So that doesn't really do any harm, does it? It's one of those again. Is it the act or is it the rule? How are they
I see
looking
where
at
this is
this?
going. Okay.
And then, of course, the people see them. And so it does make a difference. You see in that one scene before the credits roll that all of a sudden they're drawing a picture of the starship in the dirt and they're worshiping it. So there's that instant the gods have visited us and saved us, and now we know who our gods are. And that's part of what the Prime Directive is trying very, very hard to avoid. So the crew's put in that position right off the bat and trying to
Does
make.
this happen a lot throughout the this type of thing? Is that what the whole premise of this movie, like in general, like the franchise?
In general, yeah, there's a lot of let's explore different worlds, and there are moral
Oh, okay.
questions everywhere. It's really common in Star Trek to end up with a serious ethical question in an episode or in a film. Um, and you sit there and think about it and go, huh, this is a lot deeper than I thought it was. It's not just all action adventure, there's something underneath this because it was responding to that unrest in the populace in the 60s, that people were looking for more. They were looking for more meaning in life. And this whole idea of scientific adventure, I mean, we were talking about the moonshots and everything else was going on. It's like maybe when we reach that point, we'll be a better people and we'll find better things in life and we'll have peace in our world and we can explore and bring good things to other worlds. It was a very idealistic type of show. But with that, they play with the ethics. The old original series from the 60s, I think, only ran for 3 seasons, and it is really badly done. You love the characters, if you're into Star Trek, you love the characters, but it's like they have a cardboard set and move stuff around. I mean, you can just tell how little money they had to put this thing together. Some of the acting is horrendous, but it's just fun. It got better over the years. They've had so many spin-off series and now they're redoing the movies. So if you like it, there's a whole lot more to go out there and watch. You do not have to be a Star Trek convert. All you have to do is watch the beginning of the film to do your assignments, and you can decide from there if you want to go on or not. It's up to you. Yeah, but it's a fun philosophical world. So that's why I like it. I was working with our developer when we put this course together, and we're trying to think, how do we look at this? And we both said Star Trek. Do you remember that episode when? It's like, okay, yeah, that'll work.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like I've never seen Star Wars, I've never seen Lord of the Rings, like
Harry
I don't know.
Potter, like
Yeah,
none
I'm
of
just
that.
Oh my goodness.
the fantasy movies are just I don't know. My
That's
first time seeing Pirates of the Caribbean was when
For
I
a
took
class, a
yeah,
course
I don't
602.
assignment.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
watch
I'm
it and
like
watch it and watch it in there, and it's like, please, I never want to see a pirate again in my life. Yeah.
so I'm like yeah, I was like, oh, okay, well, looks like I'm watching a movie that I've never watched before. So
Yeah. The film that's in the recommended readings and resources this week is Oppenheimer, which won an Oscar. Was it last year or the year before? It's an interesting movie. There are completely unnecessary sex scenes in it, so don't watch it with your kids. They don't even add to the plot. I mean, I don't mind that they're there, but they add nothing, and then it makes me hate to recommend it to anybody else. Um, but they're there, so just be aware of that. But it's about building the bomb. You know, the scientists who got together and were pushed to build this thing and what it took, and then their reservations about it, which is kind of interesting. It's supposed to be fairly accurate. So
hmm.
it's there if you have time to watch it. If not, I get that. But it's just part of that understanding how people could build something so incredibly destructive and decide to use it and decide that this was the ethical right thing to do when it had such horrendous consequences, but it saved so many lives as well. You know, and so can we do something really, really bad to create something really, really good? I don't know. That's the argument that's still raging 80 years later.
Hmm.
it's like Thanos. That just I just made that because like you know how he like you guys have seen Avengers. Have you seen Avengers?
I have
Yeah.
not.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking like his idea was to like basically like make half the universe disappear, but his reasoning was so that then because humans were destroying the earth. So it's like is that act like yes, you're murdering essentially, but obviously like in the movie they wouldn't have shown him murder. It's like disintegrated. But
Mhm.
it's like you're like you're making half the universe go away. But the greater good is well now we have a universe that has half the population. People are now like there's an opportunity for flourishment and things like that. Um
Mhm.
so I guess it's something similar to that, or even like I guess movies where they like input a virus that like kills people because you see that people are ruining the earth, and so now these populations have opportunity to like, or the earth itself has opportunity to flourish because now there aren't people there ruining it. Is it like is that the
Yeah, ideas like that. And when you think about
okay?
AI right now and how fast that's growing and how little control or knowledge we have about what it can do, much less what it should do. I mean, and this is entirely facetious. I do not think this will really happen, but having watched sci-fi movies all my life, I can't get it out of my head. It's like, what if this
Hmm.
overarching AI brain wakes up one day and says, I figured out what's wrong with this planet. It's the humans. If we just get rid of the humans, we'll all be fine. There'll be more clean air, more clean water, more space for the animals, plant life will flourish. All we need to do is get rid of the pesky humans. There was a movie about that actually back in the 60s or 70s, Colossus the Foreman Project, and I can't get that to come up anywhere anymore. So it may have been banned for some reason, but it was about two computers that were built to wage war. One was Russian and one was American or whatever. And so they would do an electronic virtual war, and they pretty much decided to team up and get rid of the people as well because it was the people that were the problem. But, those types of ideas, it's like, what can a bad act with a good result be a good thing? That's the whole dirty hands idea
Yeah.
that you're going to think a little bit about this week.
Yeah. That's also the premise of Ender's Game, I just realized too. Because
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like the kids thought they were playing a game. And in actuality, they were in a war and they were killing people. They had no idea. And
Yeah,
so,
that was an interesting one. So yeah, it's similar to that. When you think about research, you're looking this week at the atomic bomb research before you write your paper and think about that. But I'm a bioethicist. That's one of the hats that I wear, and that's medical ethics, and research ethics. And one of the newsletters I got today was an invitation to a webinar in the next couple of weeks on xenotransplantation. Basically, they're creating organs in pigs for transplantation into humans. And they've been talking about this for the last 10 years or so, but they're at the point where they want to do human research and actually start doing this. And so they've had to develop all of these ethical boundaries and try to figure out how we make this reasonable because we don't know the end result. We think it's going to be okay, but should it be? And again, it's one of those, do you do it and just hope it's going to turn out well? How does that work in a research setting? What barriers or boundaries do you put on things like this? Because what if it's a massive failure and you kill the patients? And that's
mhm.
always a risk of research. But that's a very real example right now where a
Mhm.
bunch of scientists, doctors, and researchers and ethicists have sat down to create rules for transplanting pig organs into humans. Yeah. These things are going on in the real world, and you may be out there one of these days.
And then just to make sure, just to clarify, the for the paper, like I got that we are figuring out like how we guide research and like and thinking about our ethical standards that we want to bring, but it can be about anything.
You can be a researcher in any field you want, anywhere. You can just
Okay.
make it up. So if there's anything that interests you, go for it. You can be any position you want within that structure. This is all your brilliant idea. The idea is simply, from my end of it, is just to see you try to create some ethical rules for it. So it's really the rules and your thinking behind it that interests me, but you can be as creative or imaginative as you want. That's just fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Cecilia's just coming back. We lost her for a second. And if you folks have any questions, along the way you run into a problem, just send me an email. I try to answer them within 24 hours. I don't always succeed, but I give it a shot. So I'll try to get back to you. And it's quickest to email me directly to the dsb20a@acu.edu. If you send them through Canvas, it'll be 24 hours often before I get them.
Okay, sorry, my laptop died, but I'm
That's
back.
okay. We're just wrapping up, I think, but I wanted to make sure we waited for you and see if you had any additional thoughts or questions.
No, I don't. This Zoom meeting was actually very helpful. I tend to be an overthinker, and I put way too much time into trying to figure things out when it's,
Yeah.
it's rather simple. But no, thank you. I appreciate the examples, and you clarified my question or clarified my what I was confused about.
Well, good. And I was just saying while you were gone that, if you have questions, send me an email. I try to get back within 24 hours. Every now and then I miss, but I try. But my direct ACU email is a faster way to reach me than Canvas is. because
Okay.
Canvas batches them and sends them like once a day, and I can't get it to change. I've given up on it. Canvas is
Oh,
stronger than I am.
I never realized that.
I did not know that either.
I think I set it that way at some point in time. I think it's a setting, but I can't find my way back to it. So yours may not do that. That's what mine does. So, but that means that I don't get Canvas messages right away necessarily. Okay.
I think it would make sense if it does that, just because other times I've emailed through Canvas, it is a while, like before I hear back. So
And that could be why. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, have fun this
Um,
week. You don't have to work through all that extra stuff and the recommended stuff. It's just there in case you want to look at it and you have some time. So just do what you can, but just be creative and think. The whole course is about your thinking process. That's what I want to see, is that you're learning some of the terminology, you're understanding the theories, and you're able to apply the theories. So it's how your thought process develops that's really interesting to me. And that's what I'm looking for more than facts and figures and all of that stuff. That doesn't apply. I'm not even going to spend a lot of time grading writing, although I can't ignore citations and references because it's in my DNA. I have to at least look at them, but I don't want to grade writing in this course. I want to grade thinking, which is why it's an AI course. If that wasn't clear, it's a no AI course because I don't care if the computer can think about it. I want to see what you're thinking. Okay?
Thank you so
Okay.
much for your help.
You're welcome, and I'll be back next Thursday. If anybody has questions, come on back. Okay, good night,
Bye.
Thank you,
everybody.
Roberta. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.